Hello, everyone. We've just locked the meeting, so thank you to everyone who's here. If you know anyone who's trying to get in, tell them to please go to Extinction Rebellion Youth UK or London BLM Facebook to watch this live stream. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This is a collaboration between lots and lots of different people, and it's just hosted by ETSO Youth, but we've got some amazing trainers today. They're quite nervous, but it'll be great. So I'm going to pass over to Sammy and Eva.
Hi everyone. I think Sammy is going to introduce us, but Sammy, you good?
Sorry, hi everyone. Sorry, just doing introductions, right? Yeah. So hi everyone, I'm Sammy, and and we are here to train you in your rights.
Do you want to do the disclaimer, Sammy?
Yeah, sorry, just getting it up. So in this training, a lot of the information we're going to talk about is basically around what the law says. So our intention is to build up confidence within protesters to feel empowered when dealing with the police. However, it's always important and really, it's really important to remember that the police will do what they want at any given time, really. So the law is really subjective and can be interpreted in really different ways. So none of the following information that we give out will apply to 100% of cases. Like, as we are protesting right now, the fact that this is our society, that society is institutionally racist and people experience state power and the police differently. So it's key to remember that. Black people and people of other marginalized groups are targeted by the police and will experience higher levels of aggression. There are people on this call with like lived experience of police violence and aggression. So if anyone feels uncomfortable or distressed about anything that we're saying, you can leave this call and then rejoin at any point, or you can join the live stream on Facebook. Another important thing to remember is that this training is designed for protests happening in England and Wales only. That's England and Wales and not Scotland and Northern Ireland. This is just because the law is different in those regions. The whole talk, the training has been written from the experience of activists, along with input from different lawyers who have been representing protesters for years. It's not legal advice. We are not lawyers. We are just activists with experience in the area of kind of legal support. Yeah, and I'm going to hand over to Eva, who's going to talk about the 5 key messages.
Great, cool. So, the 5 key messages. If you forget 99% of everything else on this call today, this is the thing that you need to remember. These are just 5, really important things to remember when you're taking part in any protest. So the first one I'm going to mention is no comment. Basically, if a police officer speaks to you, the best thing you can do to keep yourself and other people safe is to avoid responding, or just say something along the lines of no comment, or I don't feel like talking to you right now. The police are trained to gather information on you and other protesters, and so by speaking to them, you do risk incriminating yourself. And just in terms of your rights, you are not legally obliged to speak to the police. You have the right to remain silent. Cool. The next one we'd say is no personal details. The police will often exploit people's inexperience with dealing with them to get their personal information. Again, note that you are not obliged to give this out. You don't need to give the police any of your personal details, so that includes basic things like your name and your date of birth, your address. When on the street, that will change later, but we'll talk about that later on in the talk. So on the street protest scenario, you do not have to give out any details. This also applies if you're not a British citizen, so just be aware. You don't need to talk to the police about your nationality or your visa status. It's not a legal obligation to carry ID in the UK. So yeah. I think Sammy is going to post in the chat, and we'll get it on the live stream chat as well, just a link to a website which has a lot more information about this, kind of like the link between arrest and nationality, immigration, that kind of thing. Just to be aware, there are a few specific situations where you might have to give these details. The only two that might apply in this circumstance is if there's a summons issued or you're in charge of a motor vehicle, or also with the new coronavirus legislation, you might also have to give your name and address if you're being given a fine, and then if you don't give those, the police will likely arrest you. So in most situations you don't have to give it, but there are always some kind of exceptions to the rule. Great. So the third thing we'd say to remember is under what power. So the police don't expect generally members of the public to know the ins and outs of the law, and so they expect you to just believe it and take it at face value when they ask you to do something. If a police officer asks you to do something, there's a couple of things you can ask just to challenge them and make sure they're acting lawfully. So, like, am I legally obliged to do this? If they say you are, you can ask them under what power, and then make a note of the legislation they state and just ask them to explain it to you. And doing things like taking down their collar number can also be useful. So yeah, that just really kind of shows them that you do know the law, you do know your basic rights, and kind of gets them to question if they're acting lawfully. The fourth one is no duty solicitor. This is so important. Please pay attention to this. If you get arrested at a protest scenario, obviously that doesn't happen to a lot of people, but it is a possibility. If you get arrested and then you get taken to the police station, one of your basic rights in this country is the right to talk to a solicitor of your choice. There's this thing called the duty solicitor, which is a solicitor like attached to that police station. They're based there, and so the police will offer you them. Please don't accept one. They are not trained or specialized in protest law. You really need a protest experience solicitor, and you have a right to request one. So please decline the duty solicitor. We have bus cards, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and they have solicitors on them. So basically all you need to know is the name of your solicitor and not their phone number, and then you ask the police to call them. In London and these protests, we are recommending the solicitors are HJA, ITN and Bindmans. So just remember those three names, and you can ask the police for a solicitor from any one of those. Yeah. If for any reason one of them can't come, this does happen in rare cases, or when there's a massive protest and they're very overstretched, make sure you give a no comment interview. That was the first of the 5 key messages, and it applies like all the way throughout the process, so not just on the streets, but in the police interview. If you can't get the solicitor of your choice who you feel comfortable with is an expert in protest law, please just answer no comment to all questions. Yep, that's just the safest thing to do. But yeah, if you get your protest experience solicitor, you can consult them about this. So that's just kind of worst case scenario. And then the last one is no caution. So a caution you'll be given at a police station. It's something that's offered to you. It can feel quite informal, but you will know you get one. It's something that you have to accept. The main thing about this is accepting a caution is an admission of guilt. So you won't be able to make your case in court at a later date and argue that you're not guilty. And yeah, though it seems like quite an easy option at the time, with like totally sympathetic, you're at the police station, you might just want to go home, it can have quite bad long-term impacts. It's almost impossible to undo, and the consequences down the line can be a bit of a pain. They show up on DBS checks, so that affects if you work with children or vulnerable adults. And yeah, there's a whole host of other stuff too. Just also another thing to note is a lot of the time protesters get arrested and then they get released from the police station, and then they never, charges are never pressed, they never receive a sentence. So in that case, their arrest won't necessarily show up on their criminal record, so criminal record's still intact, but if you accept a caution, that opportunity is gone, and like I said, very difficult to reverse. So yeah, please be aware of this. There are, like everything, exceptions to the rules. There are situations where it might be best for you to accept a caution. We would recommend if possible, the only time you should do this is if you've had advice from your protest experience solicitor to do so. And even then, ask them why you're the exception to this rule. Cool. So those were the 5 key messages. We're gonna go through them multiple times in this training and get you to like really, really get them in your head. It's really good to know them at the tip of your fingers. Sammy's just gonna quickly talk about bus cards now.
So yeah, if you've ever been to a protest, you might have been given a bus card from a legal observer, or just any of your friends who might be there and have a stack of them. So bus cards are pocket-sized cards that have it has the 5 key messages on them, so you can always have that nearby. It also has the names and numbers of all the recommended solicitor firms. So for the ongoing protest right now, as I put in the chat, we're using HJA, ITN, or Bindmans. You can call for any of them. It's always free. Representation is always free. The police might say, no, they cost so much, you won't be able to afford them. But it is really important to remember that it is free. So you can call one of them and they'll be able to get to the police station and give you some advice. Some protesters will also choose to write the name of the solicitor firm, not their number, because you don't need that, just the name of the firm and the protest support line, which we'll be talking about later, on their arms, as sometimes as your belongings will be taken off you when you get to the police station. So it might be worth writing a few key numbers on your arms. Having said all that, can everyone please put the 5 key messages, which Eva talked about, in the chat?
Or you can just like write them on a piece of paper near you or talk them out loud. Just good to get them in your head.
Yep, so there's some really good ones going on in the chat. They are all correct. Yeah. So we've got no comment, we've got no duty solicitor. Can I see the third one? What was the third one that we talked about? Yep, so under what power? Fourth one, anyone? Yes, no duty solicitor. And yeah, so, and then no caution as well. That is amazing. That is all of the 5 key messages. If everyone could just carry on doing that, just so that it gets into everyone's heads.
Yeah, and also just to say, this is like something what like a bus card might look like. So if you see people handing these out at a protest, please take one. They're really handy. Great. I might move on and just let people carry on doing that. Like I said, we'll do it multiple times throughout the training. It's just good to consolidate it. Cool. We're going to talk a little bit about police tactics. So yeah, we can never predict how the police might act in any situation, but we can learn about some of the tactics that they commonly use, and you can spot them. Keeps yourself safer and other people safe. Just to note that actions which are entirely peaceful, non-violent, not breaking any laws, the police have been seen to act unreasonably, especially against protesters who are Black or from other marginalised groups. And as we said at the start, it's just useful to remember at the forefront of our minds. And all of these things, there's a massive, massive difference between what the police can do and what they actually do. Yeah. So, just going to quickly talk about a couple of police officers you might encounter. Police liaison officers. You might see them around. They wear baby blue bibs. They're trained to like be really friendly and get information out of you. Just treat them like normal cops and say no comment. Evidence gathering officers. This is really key. This is commonly seen. So they'll be filming crowds or individuals to get information. All police officers wear body-worn cameras, so they're all filming you anyway, but these ones have like proper big cameras, like maybe mounted. Something to know is that anybody is allowed to film in public. So the police don't have any more of a right to film you than you have to film them. Legally, you don't have to comply with the police filming you. You can cover your face, you can move away from the camera. Yeah, unfortunately, we have recently seen police trying to film and photograph protesters and like being quite aggressive and intimidating with it. Like I said, they might kind of forcibly film you. So in the moment, do what you feel safest with, but it's still good to know your rights around this. And also, like I say, sometimes they have like cameras, you might see them mounted on top of vans to film whole crowds. So yeah, we have seen them using like facial recognition technology at protests recently. Yeah. So one quite common police tactic in certain scenarios is a kettle. So a kettle is when the police surround protesters and isolate them from pedestrians, bystanders. It's used to manage and contain protests. There isn't, like, something that people often want to know, is there a limit to how long they can contain you in a kettle? No, legally they can keep you there as long as they like. Also, legally, they have absolutely no requirement to provide you food or water or toilet access, anything like that. Yeah. The police, a common tactic used by the police is giving people inside the kettle the impression that in order to be allowed out, you have to give them your details. Legally, strictly speaking, that's not true. You can refuse to give your details. That shouldn't be a requirement for being let out. However, they commonly will insist on this and be quite forceful about it. So again, do what feels safest in the moment. Being in a kettle can be incredibly stressful, and you might decide that it's worth it giving your details to be let out. And then again, the police commonly use aggression, intimidation, lying. We need to remember that the role of the police isn't to side with us. They often lie and aggressive, intimidating towards protesters, so don't just believe anything they say. And as you said throughout this training, they are frequently more aggressive towards protesters belonging to marginalised groups, especially Black people and people of colour. Yeah. So they're just some like common things that you might see going on at protests. Good to be aware of them, identify them, know your rights in them. Sammy's now going to talk about a very common police tactic, stop and search.
So yeah, next we're going to talk about stop and search. A bit of a note, so I really don't have a place to speak about this, and there are a lot of people on this call who have had really bad experiences with stop and search in the past. So we're going to talk about ways which we can help reduce harm done. Some of you will know about stop and search a lot more than us, as we're non-Black people, and so we're not just going to give. So we are just going to give some legal information about it. Again, there are loads of different things, such as like the police. You don't have to give your name and details, but with this, again, we do recommend do whatever you feel is safest in the moment. So police are only supposed to use stop and search to prevent a crime from happening or to investigate a crime that's already happened. But according to a Liberty study done by Liberty, a group with civil rights and stuff focus, found that Black people in the UK are 43 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white people are, and that was done in 2019. So being stopped and searched can be really, really hard to prepare for. It's really unexpected. It can be done really informally and often without any good grounds, any like proper kind of legal basis for it. So the most important thing to remember with stop and search is to be as comfortable as possible. It is really hard, but being calm and trying not to aggravate police officers can be helpful. However, some people might find it comfortable to ask questions to the officers, challenge them in what they're doing, and some might just want to get it done over and done with as soon as possible. So again, with stop and search powers, there's no legal requirement for you to give your name, address, or nationality, or any other details. But as we said earlier, if let's say an officer is forcing you to give your details, you should do what you feel is safest. We're not going to tell you what to do, but just be as safe as possible. So an acronym we're going to talk about within stop and search is an acronym called SEARCH. It was developed by a group called YStop, I believe last year possibly, or a bit earlier than that. But we'll also talk about YStop in a bit as well. So search. So the S in search stands for stay calm. In a stop and search situation, it is best to stay as calm as possible. Try not to aggravate the officers. Try not to make it a more tense situation. The E stands for eye contact. If you can, keep eye contact with the officers, then it helps you feel a bit more in control. Obviously, it might be intimidating for some people, so again, do what you feel is safest in that situation. The A in search, is ask questions. So this is kind of a break off acronym now, and it goes into 4 Ws. So the police are legally obliged when they're stopping and searching you to answer these questions. So they have to answer who they are so that you can check their badge number, you can check their ID number, or if they're not in uniform, they still can stop and search you, but they would have to show you a warrant card. So if it's a non-uniformed officer, you can ask to see a warrant card. The next, so that was who. The next one is why. So yeah, why are you stopping the officer? What's your legal grounds for this? This is kind of similar to the third key message of under what power. So in this situation, it's best to note down what they say, note down the legislation, and write down the officer's name and number, if possible. If not, if they don't want to give their name, or if they say, I'm not giving you my name for whatever reason, just try and get their badge, their epaulette number, so it's on their shoulder. The next W is what. So this is, what are you looking for, officer? When being stopped and searched, in most cases, they have to be looking for a specific object. The police they should also be looking for something really specific and that they think you are carrying. And so when asked, what are you looking for, officer, they should be able to give you a response to that. The next one is where. This is, where are you from? What station are you based at, officer, basically. So yeah, they have a legal requirement to tell you what station they're based at. So you can ask them, what station are you based at, officer, or where are you from? And they'll have to tell you what station they are. Again, if you can, try and record this. If you try and write it down on a piece of paper afterwards, as soon as possible, just because, you might forget after. So try and get it down quickly. The R, so we're going back to the main acronym now. So in search, the R stands for receipt and record. So make sure when your stop and search is done that you ask for a receipt, or the police like to call this a docket. This is like a proof of the search proof that the search had actually happened. So if possible, try and going back to it, it's kind of like record as well. So it's receipt and record. If possible, try and get a bystander, so someone nearby, to film the search. You are legally entitled and you are legally allowed to film the search yourself. However, if you're going to do this, don't just reach into your pocket and try and grab your phone, just because obviously the police might see it differently and might see you as reaching for a weapon and they might jump at you, or or it could just get worse in that sense. So maybe it is an idea to walk them through what you're doing. So, officer, I'm now going to reach into my pocket. I'm reaching for my phone to film this search. Say something along those lines, and sometimes they'll let you do it, but a lot of the times they'll say, no, you can't put your hands in your pocket, get your hands away from your pocket. So again, in that situation, it might be best to just put your hands away from your pockets and try and get a bystander or a friend to film. So the C in search is for confidence. It is hard with someone literally searching your pocket, searching you, to be confident. But in this situation, try and be as confident as possible, just so that it doesn't, come across as that you're intimidated and so they can't really force anything out on you, so try and be as confident as possible. The next one is H. So the H in search is hold to account. If there's a legal observer nearby, we're going to talk about them in a bit. We have a whole section on them, which is coming up. If a legal observer is there, try and call them over or tell them after your search that you've been searched and try and get them to note down the information. If not, you can call the Green and Black Cross, so GBC protest support line, and we'll also put the number in the chat a bit later. So now we're going to talk a bit about your rights, like what are your actual rights during a stop and search. So during a stop and search, we've kind of already talked about this, but you're entitled to a receipt of the search, or what the police call a docket. It's a way of holding the police to account. If they don't have one of the forms with them, they should just give you the receipt number to note down. You can use the receipt number to, if they seize any items or anything, you can try and get it back at the station that they're based at. Even at this stage, even if they've taken your objects and they are giving you a form to fill it claim your objects back, you do not have to give your name and address. It's not a legal requirement. So we recommend not to give it, basically. You can also use the receipt number to make a complaint, and having a receipt number makes the whole process a lot easier. It's possible to make a complaint without a receipt number. So if you're a young person and you feel that if you're a person, and feel that you were unlawfully stopped and searched, you can use the YStop app, to report it. So on phones, if you go into your app store and search Y, so the letter Y and then space stop, and that is a really good app. So it's designed to act in stop and search situations. And if you ever feel like, the stop and search is getting out of hand, you can shake your phone and it uploads it to a secure server. So on the street, if you're being stopped and searched by an officer, they can only ask you to remove your outer clothing. So this is a coat, a hat, jumper. They can't ask you to remove your tops. They can't ask you to remove your trousers. They can't ask you to remove your shoes. Sorry. Going back. They can ask you to remove your coat. They can ask you to remove your hat and jumper. They can't ask you to remove your top. They can't ask you to remove your trousers, and they shouldn't really ask you to remove your shoes. If they want to conduct a more thorough search, so let's say they want you to take off your top or something, then they have to take you to what they call a private place. A private place is basically a place with no kind of easy vision to the public, so the public shouldn't be able to see you. A police van, an important thing to know, a police van technically counts as a private place, because it's supposed to be, a secure kind of private place with the windows being dimmed. You can and you should ask for an officer of your binary gender to search you, and they should be able to provide this where it's reasonably practicable. So before we go on to the next bit, which is Eva talking about legal observers, can everyone go back and write the 5 key messages, search, and the 4 W's in the chat? Sorry, I've got a bit of a thing with my throat. So if everyone could carry on writing, stop at the acronym search, the 4 W's, and the 5 key messages.
Yeah, these are already good. It's just really important because obviously protests, once you're actually on the street, very loud, very overwhelming, can be quite difficult to stay focused and calm. So if you get these imprinted in your brain, it's easier to remember. Cool. Okay, I might move on to the next bit and keep them coming. We're just going to talk a little bit about legal observers. So legal observers are trained volunteers who support our legal rights as activists. So they're independent and they don't participate as an activist, but they're not impartial. So they're not working with the police and they are on our side. Also, just to note that they take notes at an action, and so if you see someone wearing an orange bib taking notes, don't think, they're often legal observers and they work kind of to support us, so that don't get them mixed up for policemen. But they aren't lawyers, despite the word legal in their name. So what can they do? They can provide us bus cards with some very, very basic guidance, like reminding you of the 5 key messages, and they act as a witness to police behaviour at protests. Like I said, they often take notes, which might then later be used as part of a defence in court or to challenge police behaviour. So witness, monitor and report arrests. The latter can help a back office direct police station support to police stations. Something to note is that when they're monitoring an arrest, a legal observer might ask for your personal details. You don't have to give your details to them either if you don't want to, and also if a police officer is nearby and you don't want to give it in front of them, you can also withhold it. Cool, so that's legal observers. We're going to quickly talk about how you can reduce your risk of avoidable harm in a protest context. So one way you can do this is by being prepared in advance, thinking about what to bring to an action and what not to bring to an action, because this can actually impact you quite a lot. So the first thing to note is that whenever you're attending a protest, you want to be prepared for the possibility that you might be arrested, whether you're planning on it or not. There's always a chance of being arrested at a protest, so that's something that you need to be aware of. So it's always good to have on your bus card, as we said before, minimal ID, some cash is really handy if you do end up getting arrested and then you're released at the middle of the night from a police station the other side of London to where you live. Having some cash can be really useful. We say ideally a cheap phone, although obviously most of us need our smartphones everywhere out and about. So yeah, that's only kind of if it's an option to you. Generally, just no valuables. Like if you need to bring your phone, please don't then bring like your laptop or an expensive camera or anything else like that. Like kind of just the bare minimum of what you need. An unopened package of any medication you need and a prescription is really, really important if you did end up getting arrested. And then things to avoid, obviously, no knives, no drugs, all of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of some things you can do to prep before an action to kind of reduce your risk of harm at an action. And then we can also think about communication and language we use. This is one area which is often overlooked, but is so important, kind of like how we talk digitally about our actions. So it might not be something you're thinking about, but messaging people on things like Instagram and Facebook about actions, those apps are not secure. The police can and have done in the past intercept messages, read them. So if you want to talk about specifically action and protest related things, it might be worth downloading an app called Signal or any other kind of like secure encrypted messaging platforms. Another really important thing, don't post about particular roles that you might be doing in an action publicly on Facebook or other social media. Again, the police can use these to kind of put targets on people's backs and go after them as organisers and conspiring. So please, like, keep all of that stuff off of your social media. And probably it's likely you will have your smartphone and a protest, but you can still make it safer for when you're there. So a really, really good thing you can do, really easy, turn off Touch ID or Face ID, so the police can't just kind of get in, put a strong password on, and turn off notifications for all of your apps coming up on your home screen. So if you did end up being arrested and the police took your phone off you in custody, they can't see hundreds of messages coming in on your home screen with action details and messages about the protests and stuff. So those are kind of some things that we might overlook, but actually really, really important in keeping us and other people safe. And then obviously make sure someone knows you're at an action, friends or family members. And any under 18s, you should have the phone number of an appropriate adult. So that would normally be a parent or a legal guardian, memorized and written down somewhere. because if you get arrested, the police have to release you into the custody of this appropriate adult. Yeah, so make sure you remember that. Cool, so there are some ways that you can just kind of, minimize our risk of avoidable harm. Sammy's now going to talk about the actual arrest process.
Yep, so now we're going to talk a bit about arrest and what you can expect to going through the whole process of arrest. So when you're being arrested, the police officer should inform you the grounds for your arrest, and they should tell you the name and the number, the badge number of the arresting officer. Again, they might not do this, and it's probably best not to challenge them in that sense. So you can, if people feel comfortable saying, "Can you tell me your name? Can you tell me your number, officer? Can you tell me why I'm being arrested?" Yeah, that would be amazing. But obviously, it's up to you, and you should do what you feel safest doing. When you should also ask the police station what you should also ask the police officer what station you're being taken to. Sometimes they might not know. Sometimes they might lie to you and say you're being taken to this station and then end up telling you 10 minutes into your drive, like possibly after you've told your friends to meet you at the station. They might tell you 10 minutes into drive that you're actually being taken to another station. And this has happened in the past. It's happened as recently as a few days ago. You'll also be patted down, usually at the van or at the car, like a brief kind of search, not a full search. And then you'll be taken to a police van or a police car. So in the van or car, you might be there for a few hours, depending on what their strategy of arrest is, and other factors. We're not going to go into that in too much detail, but you could be there for a few hours. In this situation, it's best to go over the 5 key messages, especially no comment, because everything you say in a police van is being recorded and can be used against you. You don't need to give any personal details at this point. They might try and ask you for loads of details. They might say, "Give me your name, address, all of that stuff now." We don't recommend giving it in the van, just because they might drive you 10 meters down the road and then release you from the van. It might have just, there's reasons they do that, and it's called a de-arrest. So they might have just de-arrested you 10 minutes into the drive, or even a few hundred yards away from the site or from the protest. So when you get to the police station, you will probably be subjected to a more thorough search. Your possessions, so everything that you had on you, will be taken off you and listed on a custody record. When they give you the custody record to sign, it's important to sign right below the last object. And this is just so that the police can't really add anything to it after. Check it over a few times, make sure that nothing's been added, make sure that, everything that belongs to you is there. Let's say you brought your phone in with you and they haven't listed it. Who knows? Make sure that they put it down. Yeah. So then after your belongings are taken off you, your personal details will also get taken from you. So they'll ask you loads of different questions at the custody desk in the hope that you'll answer them all. But we usually recommend, and obviously it's up to you, we usually recommend giving your name, your date of birth and address, and no other information. This is the information that they need to check to make sure, A, there's nothing in your past, such as a warrant out for your arrest or something. And also this is just so that they can send letters to your address afterwards. They usually can only hold you for 24 hours, but as Evis has said before, with every rule, there come some exceptions. You don't need to answer, so they might try and ask you for your nationality. You don't exactly need to answer the question unless the officer specifically requires you to do so. So if the officer says, "Can you tell me your nationality?" and you say no comment to that question, he can say, "I'm demanding you to give it." And then you can say, "Under what power, officer?" If he comes up to you and says, "This power is what I'm using, you need to give me your nationality." At this point, if you refuse to give it, so if you say no, it's a separate offence, and it's just a separate offence, and it's important to be aware of that. You'll also be asked loads of other questions. which you might choose to answer, which you might not choose to answer, such as questions about mental health and physical health. If you tell an officer that you have a mental health problem, or if you answer that question with no comment, you'll be put on what the police call suicide watch. And it entails officers checking on you at more frequent intervals than if you didn't declare anything, which might be more disruptive. But again, it's ultimately your choice. Our recommendation? We're not going to tell you what to do again. Do what you feel is safest. If you take any medications, as Eva said earlier, it's important to bring them in an unopened package with you, along with a prescription, just so that you can prove that this is my medication and this is, what you're supposed to be taking. And in the pharmacy packaging as well. So if you're injured during your arrest or before your arrest and you need any medical attention, tell the police officers, as you have the right to medical advice and to see a doctor at any point in custody. If an officer did injure you during arrest, let's say you had a particular rough arrest, it is really, really important that you get a doctor to come in and examine you, just because the doctors have to make notes, and then these notes can be used later if, let's say, your arrest was really, really aggressive and the force that they used wasn't reasonable. There's loads of reasons why, but it's best to see a doctor. And now we're going to talk a bit about phone calls, like your rights to phone calls. So when you're in custody, you typically have the right to make 2 phone calls if you're an adult. So we recommend that these 2 phone calls are the first one to your solicitor. This is so that your solicitor can come to the station as soon as possible. So if there's any questions in the chat, we'll come back to them after. So we recommend that you call a protest experience solicitor off your bus card. So this is HJA, I'm going to say it again, so HJA, ITN, or Bindmans. Remember one of them, you don't have to remember all 3, just remember their names, and that is enough. Another number that you can call is one that I'm going to put in the chat. Is this number, and that is the Green and Black Cross legal helpline, which is in the chat now. So during your custody, you can call GBC, and they'll be able to walk you through your rights again, remind you of your 5 key messages, and try and provide you as much other information as possible. It's also important so that people know where you are, and also if you call GBC, they can contact other people on your behalf, so you can contact more than just the 2 people. As a minor, so if you're if you're a minor under 18, or if you're a vulnerable adult, which the police can say that you have the right to make 1 extra phone call. So in this case, you'd have the right to call an appropriate adult, which Eva talked about earlier. Have their number written down, as it's really useful. If not, the police might call social services, and this isn't so great just because there's loads of different reasons why it's not so great. But having your family can also be helpful. The next one we're going to talk about is information, so biometric information. So after recording your details, the officer will take your photograph. If you don't comply with this, they can use reasonable force to view your face and take your photographs. They'll also take fingerprints and DNA. There's some exceptions to this rule, which we won't really go into too much detail, just because it would be like an information overload. But there are some exceptions in which cases they shouldn't, and it's best to ask your solicitor, if possible, whether you should give your if you should be taking photographs and biometric information like fingerprints and stuff. So we're going to talk a bit about your rights in custody next. So you have the right to free legal advice. Again, I'm going to say it again because recently we've had cases where people have been told it's not free. But all legal advice at a police station is free. So call HJA, ITN, or Bindmans, and they'll be able to provide free legal advice and free police station representation for you when you're at the station. You should be allowed to speak to your requested solicitor, so HJA, ITN, or Bindmans, on the phone, In general, the police will pass on your request and call the solicitor to the station using a switchboard. And that's another reason why you don't need to know their phone numbers. A solicitor from the firm should then come to the station and you can have a one-to-one chat with them, but you shouldn't rely on it being private. It may be monitored, so just don't say anything incriminating. You also have the right to a phone call, to the phone calls, which we discussed earlier. You have the right to a copy of PACE, which is Police and Criminal Evidence Act, Codes of Practice, which actually, I'll just put it in the chat now, just because I can copy and paste. The next one is, so you also have the right to an interpreter. If English isn't your first language, if English is your first language, they wouldn't give you an interpreter. But yeah, that is, if English isn't your first language, you do have the right to an interpreter. The next one is regular meals that meet your dietary requirements, whatever they may be. You also have the right to water, tea, and coffee at meal times. You have the right to warmth, so blankets, pillows, and jumpers, and the lights to be dimmed if you want to sleep, and doctor for medical attention, or if you get injured. The next one we're going to talk about is interview. So this is police interview. If you're going to be interviewed, don't accept the duty solicitor. They're not experienced in protest law, as we've said before. Call the solicitor on your bus card and refuse to be interviewed until they arrive. You should not be interviewed without your appropriate adult present if you're under 18 or if you're deemed to be a vulnerable adult. We recommend that you do a no comment interview, which I think Eva talked about earlier, I can't remember. But it's where you respond to every single question with no comment. So they might ask you loads and loads of questions. They might use different tactics like guilt tripping, being friendly, being aggressive. It's just to throw you off and try and get you to incriminate yourself. Just say no comment to every question. But obviously, your solicitor might come and tell you to answer like a few questions, or they might give you a statement to read out. Contact HAA, ITN, or Bindmans. Release is what we're going to talk about next. So the police can hold you usually for 24 hours. There's some exceptions to that rule, but usually it's 24 hours. So very often people are released in the middle of the night, so remember to bring some cash and stuff with you. Hopefully we'll have a police station support team waiting outside the station with some snacks and warm drinks. So we're working with loads of other groups to provide this. So it's important to also have some cash so you can get home safely. Sometimes some of your property might be kept as evidence. That's not, that can happen as well. So now, with all that being said, that was like loads and loads of information. We're going to get you to write the 5 key messages, search, and the 4 W's in the chat again. So that was the 5 key messages, search, and the 4 W's. So we've got some good ones going on in the chat. That's the first key message. Yes, that is amazing. Those are all 5 key messages. Yes, under what power? Got the whole lot going on. No caution. Search, I saw search there somewhere. Stop and no caution unless advised. Under what power? So I'm going to let you carry on doing that, and I'm going to hand over to Eva, who's going to talk about, he's going to talk you through the next bit.
Cool. So we're just going to talk about post arrest really quickly. We're coming to the end of this section now.
Okay, that was pathetic.
Oh. So there are quite a few different so you'll get let out of the police station. Call GBC if someone hasn't called them on your behalf already, or you haven't called them from the police cell. So there are many like possible consequences of a conviction. We're only going to talk about a few that are most relevant, but there are hundreds. Everybody copes with arrest in different ways, and so for some people, the psychological impact of it can be quite severe. It can be quite like a traumatizing experience. Other people, not so much. So that's something to be aware of. It affects lots of other things like mortgages and insurance and that kind of stuff. I'm not going to go into like the ins and outs of that now. There's lots of good resources which we could signpost you to. Yeah, something that's maybe more relevant for this age group, just be aware it can impact your kind of education and university. So when you're applying for universities, they might ask you to disclose your criminal record, especially if you're applying to do a degree like nursing or teaching. I think Sammy's going to post a link in the chat to some useful information. Like we said before, non-UK nationals can be affected differently by these things, so Sammy's also going to put in the chat I think a link that's been posted earlier on in the training, but it is really, really good. Talks a lot about arrest and how that impacts immigration status and stuff like that. I think it was mentioned before as well, but DBS checks, these come up. So yeah, once spent, your conviction might not appear on a basic or a standard DBS check, but they might show up on enhanced ones. So that's something to be aware of. And then another really important area that can be affected is travel and applying for visas. So again, there's going to be a link posted for that, just because these areas are huge and quite specific to individual circumstances, and it'd be really, really boring to go through the ins and outs of that now, but it's just good to be aware of in your head. If you're putting the whole arrest process together, like you attending a protest could lead to an arrest, and an arrest could lead to a conviction, and a conviction could lead to impact on a whole host of areas in your life. So it is really good to be informed and aware of these things before you attend a protest, so you're not kind of taken by surprise further down the line if it goes in this direction. But yeah, that is kind of the basic legal know your rights information that you need to know at a protest. We've kind of come to the end of the content section. Sammy's really quickly going to talk about how GBC can support you, and then we're going to have a 5-minute break to gather your questions together, and then we'll try and answer some of those. Yeah, have you got anything to add, Sammy?
Yeah, so we're not going to really talk about it in too much detail because we could go on for ages. But basically, if you get arrested inside custody, you can call GBC, which is the number that I posted in the chat a bit earlier. It's also published on the LDN BLM Instagram accounts everywhere. Please call them and they'll be able to support you within custody. As soon as you're released as well, give them a call, tell them that you're out of the station, that if there's a team there, you can use their phones and they can call GBC. And so that's just so we know we can get some more information about what's going on. If you've been charged with an offence, like court support, and there's loads of stuff that we can do. We're not going to go into too much detail, but basically call GBC as soon as you get released. We're going to have a 5-minute break, and so I'm going to hand back to Poppy for this, just so that we can go through the questions, and we'll be back in 2 minutes. Oh, 5 minutes, sorry.
Yep, so we're just going to have a 5-minute break while we look through everyone's questions and choose which ones we're going to answer. So feel free to nip. Yep. Yeah. Welcome back, everyone. Sammy's going to go through some COVID-19 social distancing stuff, specifically for, what's happening at the moment, and then we'll get into your questions.
So with COVID, there's a few regulations within that prevent mass gatherings. So there's a thing called Schedule 7. This prevents mass gatherings of over 7 people. There is also, we're not going into too much detail, but there's also other laws that, your rights to protest. So the police have to balance these rights and make sure that, you're allowed to protest, but then, COVID laws are also kind of upheld. And so it's kind of like a balancing act between them. We're not going to go into each individual law in too much detail, just because it can get quite technical, but they do have to balance both of them and make sure that you can protest, but then also, kind of limit that with the COVID restrictions. Yeah, so that's kind of about coronavirus. With that being said, there's also, so the police are typically being asked to disperse people first, so send people home, get them going on their way. If people don't leave, then they're being told to issue fines. So these aren't criminal convictions, they're fines that will be sent to your address, and that's why they ask for your name and your address so that they can send the penalty to you. Um, and these are typically like, they can be pretty expensive, but yeah, they're typically around £200, sorry. Yeah, and yeah, so that's kind of about coronavirus. There are other bits and bobs that they can do, but that's the kind of general gist of it. So I think we're going to go into the main kind of questions now. Yep. So as Poppy said, a good way to show the police that the guidelines are going to be listening to is stay kind of social distance and all that stuff. But we're not going to go into that because that isn't really what we do. So there was a question saying, are you required to give your name and address if they want to issue a fine? Yes. If you decline to give your name and address, and you again choose to stay, they will probably arrest you, as Eva said earlier. We obviously can't guarantee that they will, but they are most likely to.
Yeah, that's what happened at the XR protest at the weekend.
Yeah.
And other ones that have been going on this week.
Yeah.
We've
so
been involved in.
Yeah, like Sunday and Monday, that's kind of what we saw happening. Fines are being issued, offered, issued. And then if not, then arrests would happen.
Do you want to go through the ones we
go,
wrote down now?
Yeah, we can go through the doc. So the hosts, the people who are hosting this, have been putting all the questions that you guys got in the chats onto a doc, which is helpful for us so that we can see them. So the first question is, can you just not respond when police talk to you? So I'm worried about saying no comment, and there's a bit of information after that. So yeah, so with protest kind of laws and protest offences, even if you are arrested and probably charged, like it's at the Home Office's discretion, but like protest offences, like they're quite minor, so they typically won't cause a deportation of people. There are some obviously exceptions to this rule, but we're not going to go into too much detail. But most things that you can be arrested at a protest for are not things that you can be deported for. I think Eva was going to answer the next one.
So someone said, I've seen some advice saying bring ID to protest. Is this a good idea? We did cover this earlier, but just to reiterate, bringing ID is not advisable if you can avoid it, just because obviously if you don't want to give your name and details on the street, but say it was a stop and search, they could just look at your driver's license or credit card or whatever and get it. So yeah, if you can avoid it, just no unnecessary ID.
So the next one, or one of the ones that I can see in the chat, is how do I know what my local protest experience listers are? So if any of you are attending protests in London, we are recommending HJA, ITN, or Feynman. There we go. So all three of those, you can call any one of them. Yeah, they're all really good, experienced protest lawyers. There's also this chat if you're planning protests out of London. So that is a website called a group called NetPol, which are the Network for Police Monitoring. They have a list of really experienced lawyers in protest law. Yeah.
So the next question is about body cameras. Can you ask them to turn them off, and do they have a legal obligation to comply? So this goes back to the thing about the police have just as much right to film them as you. Police have just as much right to film you as you do to film them, so they can turn them on and off at their discretion. They don't have to listen to what you request of them. People do actually ask for them to be turned on, funnily enough, not off, because it can then be, if they arrest you and then you think that they didn't do it properly, that can be quite useful in court. So normally we get people asking if you can ask them to be turned on. Sam, you want to get the next one?
Yeah. Sorry. So yeah, what are the risks for international students on a visa, on a Tier 4 visa? I believe that it's covered in the website that we posted, which I think Eva can post again just because I lost the link.
I'll get it in a sec.
Yeah, so that is a link with loads of different information about different immigration stuff that might occur when going to a protest. So yeah, that's a really good website, which Eva's going to post again. There's a few other, while Eva's doing that, I'll answer the COVID questions. So there isn't really, so they can typically, we've kind of already done it. The police do have kind of these additional powers, but of like dispersal, they can try and get people to go home using fines, threatening arrests and stuff like that. It might be worth, if you're planning one or if someone else is planning one, to make it socially distanced, just to, kind of counteract, I don't want to say counteract, but like, you know what I mean, by balance kind of, the safety and stuff. And this can be shown to deter people being arrested. But there aren't really too many like changes in like legislation. There's grounds for arrest under this COVID Act, but there's not, it doesn't mean that, you can't, it shouldn't mean that you can't protest.
And also, I think Boris Johnson said in the House of Commons yesterday that he believes that protesting, if it was done socially distanced, was a right in this time. So yeah, you do still have that human right to peaceful protest. I'm going to quickly cover a couple of just like ones about like being when you've been arrested and taken to prison. So police station, sorry. Do you have to have a parent or guardian's number written down, or having it memorized just enough? Memorized is fine. Doesn't really matter. In terms of, someone asked when they'd have to answer about their nationality. So it's only an offence to not answer this question if an officer specifically says, I require you to tell me your nationality. Then you would have to. And someone says, is it best to see a doctor if you're injured during arrest, or are you entitled to one? So if you're injured during an arrest, probably the first time that you'll be able to request a doctor is when you get taken to the police station, and you are entitled to one. And we would recommend that you take that up. The police have a duty of care to you once you're inside the police station. Sammy, do the
so the next one is, if you are on suicide watch, will the police deem you to be a vulnerable adult? Again, it can be different, but typically yes, that is what if you declare, let's say, mental health problems that you might have had in the past, then they might put you on suicide watch, and that would also mean that you become a vulnerable adult. And so you might need an extra, you might need the appropriate adult to come down to the station as well. I'm also going to answer another one on phones at protests. Would you recommend putting them on flight mode? Like, we have recommended in the past, like, it's not so much that, rambling, but typically, yes, you can put it on flight mode if you want. Obviously, you can, people need data to contact people, their friends, people who are at the protest with them. So you might choose not to. Again, we don't exactly know what technology that the British police have. They might have ways that they can track everyone's phones. We simply do not know. It's, pretty kept quiet about. So you might want to choose to turn your location off. A lot of people have been posting about it on social media. Turn your location off so that you can't, a map of you can't be made. And so that's kind of what is recommended in that sense. But flight mode, if you want to be, if you want to do that, do it. If you don't, then don't. We can't really tell you what to do. But so it's just, we're not really aware of all the tech that the police have.
Cool. So someone has asked, is it bad that their name is on Facebook, and who should they not go tomorrow? So obviously most people's Facebook have their name. That's quite standard. I assume you mean, is it bad because you're in some form of like protest group? So the name isn't really a problem. Just like we said before, be careful about, like, say it's on an event that you're hosting, maybe use that with discretion, maybe choose to host it on a more secure one, or set up a Facebook with a name that isn't your own just to host the event. But yeah, it's just something to be aware of. There are other good apps for organizing things and having group chats. And in terms of whether you should not go tomorrow, that's an entirely personal decision. I hope you feel informed enough after this session to make your own kind of decision on whether you feel safe enough to go or not. I think the next one's you, Sammy.
So again, with coronavirus stuff, we've talked about it before. So typically you'll be so another one was about, it's following on from this question. It says, what conditions are like if you're detained? You're not usually going to be kept with other people. You will get a cell by yourself in the police station, and so yeah, that is how it is. And that is that question answered, I do believe. The next one, sorry.
Oh no, go for it.
Is it worth to lodge a complaint with the police after a witness disproportionate force is being used, not necessarily against me? So there is a thing called it's either the IPCC or the IOCC is one of them. I think it's IPCC. And it is a way that you can report officers for wrongful doings. However, investigations don't go that, they usually won't go that far. Not much happens to the police officer. They typically won't get reprimanded for it. They might have, small telling off, but obviously it is dependent on situation. If you do want to report something to them, then I would recommend going onto the website.
So that's the kind of thing you might want to talk to like a solicitor about. Like you said, me and Sammy aren't lawyers, so anything of that kind of nature, if you're interested in pursuing it, you would need to get legal advice.
And you can do that by contacting Feynman's, HJA, or ITN. If you have any other, we're going to answer some more, but I'm just going to put it in the chat now. This is an email account that was set up for answering these kind of questions and for other stuff. I'm going to put it in the chat now. So if you have any other questions, you can put them there.
Yeah, so if we don't get around to a question this live stream, or if it comes to you after the time, or if there's a question you want to ask where you don't want to put all the details out here, please do email us on that email, and we can get a more detailed answer back to you. I'm just going to quickly do some of these. So online platforms you would recommend for protest discussion chats. I'm trying to think. Said Signal. The problem is different groups have different recommendations. There's a lot of different conflicting things. Some people think that WhatsApp is good enough. Some people don't. Some people would recommend Telegram. Other groups wouldn't. I don't know if, I'm trying to think if there's any other obvious ones. I think Signal is commonly agreed to be very secure. Can you think of any others, Sammy?
Nah, just use Signal.
Yeah, Signal's pretty good, easy to download. But yeah, stay clear. It's more like what you should stay clear of, like Instagram, Facebook, those kind of things. Do you want to do? I think there's one for you, Sammy.
Yeah. So, as an immigrant, are there any extra precautions I should take? / laws are different. So again, with protest law, if you're arrested at a protest, if you're even convicted of a protest, there's a really, really little chance that you'll actually be deported or that your visa will be revoked. Obviously, there are different situations, such as the leave to remain, indefinite leave to remain, and there are loads of other stuff. A lot of that is mentioned on the website which Eva posted, Informed Dissent, a few times. But obviously, there are people with really, really precarious immigration statuses. And so sometimes it's just recommended, if there's a really strong chance of you getting arrested, such as in a protest where there's loads of police expected and loads of that expected, it might just be safer to sit back and not go to the protest. There are other ways of protesting. There's other ways you can get involved. But yeah, there are, again, we're not going to tell you what to do, but in that situation, it might be a decision of whether you should actually go and risk, having your immigration status being questioned and that stuff. Again, a lot of it is up to the Home Office. It is at their discretion to do basically what they want with your following your arrest and stuff. But yeah, if any more questions come out of that, check out the website which Eva posted or email the account.
Yeah, I would definitely, just to echo that, like, the point of this training is not to necessarily answer every single specific legal question you have, but more to like promote this culture of really carefully considering and doing your own research about specific areas of law that might affect you. And yeah, like, just to reiterate that sometimes the safest option when you weigh it up is to protest in another way that isn't specifically attending right then and there. Like, especially within COVID times, there are a lot of people who for other reasons than immigration status, possibly like they are immune compromised or someone they live with. Once again, possibly attending a protest wouldn't be the safest thing for you to do. And yeah, definitely don't feel any kind of like, don't feel bad about that at all. It's like different times for everyone, different things you can do.
So another question is about fines and like basically, are they a criminal record? No, they are not a criminal record. They shouldn't be on your criminal record. They shouldn't be on. They're not a conviction or anything, and so they should be. They shouldn't be there. They're just a fine that you get in the post. There are some cases where you might be asked if you've been issued with a fine. Obviously, there are some situations which you might be asked, and it might affect that. Let's say at a job interview or stuff like that. Typically, it's not too big of an issue, but depends on the individual situation and loads of other stuff as well. So we're not going to go into too much detail, but it's not a criminal conviction or an offense, it's not a criminal conviction, and it's not like supposed to be in the record.
I could start off the conditions one, Sammy. So someone's asked what conditions can be imposed at a protest in normal circumstances. Again, depends on kind of like the protest itself, whether you're in communication with the police beforehand, how long it goes on, etc., etc. Some ones that we have seen, maybe they might put in like there's so many technical bits of law that they could employ. A section 14 might be put on that stops people gathering in one place for a certain amount of time. It's kind of a bit of an open-ended question. There's so many they could do. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Sammy, but it's a bit
We've typically
big.
just seen people being dispersed because of COVID stuff, and
Yeah.
not too much any of the other ones. So that's kind of the main one that we've been seeing.
I don't think we have any other questions on the doc right now. So if anyone has any others that they want, this chat is very full, so your question might have been missed. So if you have any others, feel free to.
Someone just asked about burner phones. Yeah, it is recommended if you can. Get a burner phone. They're really cheap phones. You can get it for about £5 at some shops. And they have a lot less information than a usual smartphone would have.
You most definitely be charged with an offence if you get arrested, or is there a chance you might not get charged? Yeah, so there's a lot of different options when you be arrested. You can be released under investigation, and then they can decide whether to press charges. You can be released with no further action, so you just got arrested and they never pursued it. You can be charged at the time. So yeah, that's definitely a possibility, and that does happen in quite a lot of activist situations where you get arrested and then they never follow up on the charges. Do you want to do the one about the next one?
Yeah, so will arrests without charges stay on your record in any way? So again, in a lot of cases, it's up to the police's discretion. Sometimes they can leave arrests on there, and they will show up. But obviously, if you have an investigation ongoing, your arrest will be on your record. But then you also do have the right to explain why you were arrested, what the situations of that arrests were, and if it's like an employment question, then you should be able to explain to your employer why you were arrested and what you were doing basically.
I can see another one. Do you want to get that one, Sammy?
Yeah, so basically if you post a bus card on your Instagram story, note this cannot be used against you. It's just bits of legal information that are being published. Yeah, you can post them far and wide.
Yeah, so it's not like anything on social media related to protesting or a cause that you care about. It's more kind of like if you're organising or that kind of thing. There's nothing illegal about sharing someone's basic rights or a bus card. Yeah, I don't think we have any other questions. Like we said, if you have ones that you remember after this or they come to you at any point, feel free to email in. I don't know if, I'm not really sure how the live streaming function is working. I'm not sure if there's like comments on the Facebook Live or questions from there. I don't know if Poppy or someone.
Yeah, so all the questions have been put in the Doodle Doc, so you will have answered them from Facebook people as well.
Okay, that's cool.
So it seems like we've answered most people's questions. Reminder that you can go back on Facebook. The live will be saved there. So feel free to go back and, if you forget the key messages or anything like that. Reminder to follow London BLM, LDN BLM on Instagram and Facebook, as they're posting lots and lots of really great legal advice, and they're working really closely with Green and Black Cross, etc. So they really do know what they're talking about. And we will also be posting lots of legal advice on our ETSI Youth platforms. Feel free to message us if you just get lost and go, I need help, but not sure who to contact. We're putting pretty much all our energy into supporting you guys at the moment. We want, all the Black Lives Matter protests to be as safe as possible. Yeah, we really want to support you guys. So feel free to message us. Thank you to everyone saying thank you in the chat. That's really lovely. Sammy and Eva, you guys were amazing.
Thanks for having us.
So yeah, thank you everyone for coming. We will stop live streaming in a sec. And we're off air.